Well, welcome. Getting near the end of the year, school's fully underway, and we've got two guests here that, whether you know it or not, are two of the most influential people in your child's life, or if you don't have children, in the property values of your home. So let's start with introductions.
I'm Dr. Kevin McIntyre, Superintendent of the Milford Public Schools. Thanks for having me tonight, Al.
Tim Kernan, a principal of Woodland Elementary. Thanks for having me as well.
And welcome to Milford.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You have the flagship now.
I guess so. Yeah, it's been a wonderful start to the year, and a wonderful start to my career here in Milford. And I feel very fortunate and blessed to be part of the Milford Public Schools on the other end, having come through as a student, now being an administrator. So it's been quite a ride. So enjoying every second.
So the fundamental question people want to know: is the building living up to the hype?
I believe it is. You know, it's one exciting day after another. You know, working with we're at 994 students. So we're just we got up to 999 on one day, and we've had a couple come and go. We almost got to that magic number.
But that's amazing. The high school.
Yeah.
You know, we think of our high school, which we always looked at as the huge school.
Right.
That's just 1,000.
Yeah. So we're in 150 staff, and everything that we do throughout the year has been so many firsts. You know, whether it's the first recess, the first rainy day, the first, we're anticipating any day now, maybe our first snow.
Snow.
So all these things
that's a
dirty word. That's a four-letter
that you
word.
don't anticipate happening, and they happen, and it's the first. Oh, we hadn't thought of that happening today, or there's so many new firsts. Like, for example, today they were flushing all the irrigation lines, so we had the sprinklers all being cleaned out and flushed, but it was so cold this morning it caused ice. On some of the sidewalks, so we got to break out the ice melt. So all those little things are first.
Looking over at Woodland, saying it's almost December. Why is he watering the plants?
Yeah. So they haven't been working for a little while as far as watering anything, but we were just cleaning out those lines, and it just caused. For the first time, I was walking out to greet kids in the morning, and there was a slippery patch, and it was calling our custodian over to break out the ice melt, and all those firsts that you don't that are coming up along the way. It's been exciting.
We'll get back to Woodland, but Kevin, what are the biggest challenges you're facing?
So, I would say our biggest challenges really are kind of just keeping our laser focus on student learning and growth. And I think our principals and our teachers are doing a fantastic job with that. I meet with each principal every month, and we kind of talk about the various issues happening in the school. And our real focus, and I'm going to emphasize this throughout my tenure in Milford, is really what's happening in the classroom, because that's the heart of what we do. So we want to kind of focus, the majority of our conversations. Obviously, we're going to have conversations about sprinklers and getting sidewalks icy, and somebody not being dropped off at the right bus stop. But the focus of really what we do is that teaching and learning that happens, and that's. I think it's our biggest challenge and our biggest opportunity, because we really want to have every classroom in Milford be an engaging classroom where students want to stay. They want to kind of hear what the teacher has to say next and be engaged in whatever's happening in terms of whatever subject it is, whether it's English, math, science, social studies, music, whatever. And that's really I think it's a challenge of every educator, but I think that's our biggest challenge and our biggest focus.
But isn't that universal?
It 100% is. It 100% is. I think sometimes, though, we get lost in other things. We get focused on a variety.
Who's going to trim the bushes around Woodland now that they have them?
Exactly. You get caught up in a lot of those kinds of issues that are ancillary to really what it's the core of what we do, which is the teaching and learning that's happening, and really the learning.
Realistically, I've said all along, we're all prejudiced. Some biased towards Milford, some against. But the universal judge to me are the colleges. My daughter got in both. Well, Emily only applied to Holy Cross, but scary movie. Lexi got into every college she applied to.
And if you look at where students are getting accepted to, last year our valedictorian went to Harvard. We had students accepted to a number of some of the most competitive and selective colleges and universities across the country, and even into Canada. We had a couple students accepted into a couple Canadian colleges. This year we already have a student who's accepted an offer from Yale University, and we anticipate this year's group doing just as well as last year's group and in the group before that. So I think the opportunity is there for students to kind of see where they want to go. And our job is really to get them there and really to focus on how are we going to provide them with the tools that are going to make them successful for that next phase of
And
life.
I think a lot, we look at central testing and the results. We always run into the fact that Milford, on average, is below a lot of the towns around us. And I go back all the way, I've said it a number of times, to when Lexi hit Middle School East. And quiet and shy Tommy Davern was running it. And you talk about somebody with a passion, that was his building. Those were his kids. You could feel it, you knew it, you just couldn't ask for more of a dedicated person. And I walked in, I said, how come your test scores suck? Because I was on the advisory committee.
He probably appreciated that question.
Oh yeah, he laughed. He said, I remember his words were, because you're ignorant. I said, oh good, enlighten me. And that's when he explained to me that, he said, look, our top kids do as well or better than any school around. But we have a bimodal, there's not a pure Gaussian curve here. You have two Gaussian curves. Because you have kids who are just coming into the country, just learning, and they don't get as high of a scores. So when you average them, the mean and the average looks lower than other towns. But if you look at the two curves as separate entities, we have nothing to be ashamed of.
No, and even our test scores, if you look at it just from like a global perspective, and this is a weird time to be looking at test scores because we're going to be in our third different test this year because we went from MCAS, we've done a couple of years of PARCC, and now we're MCAS 2.0, which I think for this year is going to be very similar to PARCC, but with the MCAS 2.0 label on it. And as they kind of further develop the test, I think we'll see some changes. But our test scores tend to be, and I did a presentation for the school committee and basically put, if Milford were a state, where we would land. And really, generally, we're at or above the state average, most grades. Grade or two, we might fall below, grade or two, we might fall above. But you look at what Massachusetts does nationally, and we always finish number one, whether you look at SATs, ACTs, you look at international assessments like PISA or TIMS, and Massachusetts is always the top in the country. Sometimes Vermont squeaks ahead of us one year, but generally, and sometimes Minnesota, but generally Massachusetts is number one. And we're generally at or above the state average of the highest performing state in the United States, and if you disaggregate Massachusetts, if Massachusetts were a country, we're finishing in the top 5, typically, compared to other countries in the world, always in the top 10.
And again, I mean, I think my daughter put it into perspective when she told me, since she does all the special needs work, that her job is to bring children to their potential.
Absolutely.
She said, Dad, not all my kids have the same potential. It's a fact of life. But my job is to figure out what they can achieve and do everything I can to get them to that level. And I looked and I said, actually, that's every educator. In an ideal role, not everybody's going to Harvard. Not everybody is going, but the kids who their reach school is Worcester State or somewhere, we ought to be doing everything in the world to get them there.
And we want to, and that's our goal. We really want every student, whatever their goal is, to help them along the path, and that starts if they enter the preschool at Shining Star, Brookside Memorial, Woodland, Stacy, all the way through to the high school.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, you think about it, you've got such a critical role to get the kids to love education. Because at the ages you get them, it kind of feels like that inflection point.
Well, he's definitely at a weird spot because he's moving from the learn to read phase to the read to learn phase, and there's a lot of transition there. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. The kids are starting to find their paths and find their interests, and you'll see kids that are really taking off to whether it's some of the STEM fields or science and social studies, or where they're finding a passion for certain subjects, and and they're starting to know themselves as learners as well. Like, okay, what kinds of accommodations do I need to make for myself, or what kinds of strategies do I need to use in order to be my best learner and to perform the best? So kids are starting to just understand themselves. It's basic metacognition. How do I think? How do I learn? Whether it's how do I take notes on a certain subject? So kids are starting to understand that about themselves and understand that about themselves as learners. It's exciting to see as kids kind of find their path and how they're going to perform best in the classroom.
Do you see differentiation at the Woodland, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade already? Kids who are going more to STEM versus STEAM, or more to arts versus science?
You start to see that, absolutely.
You already see it at that age?
You can see that for some kids, whether it's something that's within them as a personality, or just something that they have an interest in because of, my dad's an engineer and I want to be an engineer, that kind of thing. You can start to see that.
I remember, 2 daughters, totally different. Mm-hmm. Getting my oldest to go to bed on time. I mean, many a time, my darling bride took her up to bed, and then you'd hear the thump, 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 thump. Lexi come running down saying, "Shh, I put mommy to bed." Whereas Emily, my youngest, would run up to bed. Not a problem, she's in bed. Then we go home and find out she was hiding math books.
Sure.
And sniped a flashlight. So she'd throw the blanket over her head and work on her math books. Mm-hmm. So right away you knew, okay, one's going to be very different from the other. I just didn't know how early it, really started on an educational level.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see that those, subtle differences between kids at young ages, like you described, and you can see that in the classroom as well, without a doubt.
So what do you do to nurture that?
Well, you certainly want to nurture students' strengths, but also have them acknowledge in a very honest way their areas of challenge as well. And you don't want to just continually feed their strengths, right, and neglect those areas where they need to work on. So it's a matter of coaching and encouragement. It's a little bit of psychology, certainly, of which buttons do I need to press to keep kids engaged and motivated to work on those things that they do really well at, because everyone wants to do the things that they're successful at, but challenge them as well. So one of the things that we talk about is that struggle. There needs to be some tension with kids where it's all right for them to make mistakes and to fail a little bit and to work at something. They need to feel that, whether it's a strength or an area of weakness for them. So there's a lot of psychology involved.
I remember I was part of an experiment at Holy Cross. The year I went in, they did away with core curricula. So you no longer had to take anything except your major. And they expected people to spread out. Of course, the current provost looked at me and said, "It's because of people like you that we stopped that." Because every time I went to the dark side of campus, that liberal arts stuff, I would get scared and run back. Yeah. In my little science building, A plus B always equals C. Very simple.
Yeah.
Got over the sociology and all, unless B had a bad childhood. Or A came, and there's like, okay, what's the answer? Well, no, there can be many answers. No, I want one. Yeah. I want to know A plus B gives me a C. So I would fill myself. Yeah. Of course, now my daughter put it in perspective when she was trying to get her mother to review a paper. Mm-hmm. I said, "You want me to look it over?" She goes, "Dad, with all due respect, you have the grammar skills of a dead bovine." And I said, "Oh, I guess I should have taken more liberal arts courses."
That's funny.
Well, I think in the classroom, how that plays out as well is the classroom community. We have to have kids feeling safe, that they can make mistakes and that they can take a risk with their learning and know that they're not going to be ridiculed, or the teacher or another student is not going to criticize them, that they feel all right saying, "This is something that's hard for me, I need some help with this," or "Let me take a chance at this and give it my best shot," knowing that there's going to be a teacher and other students that are there that are going to be supportive and encouraging and positive about that. So there's a lot of community building involved in allowing kids to do that.
I think too, it's really nice that we have such dedicated educators. Because, you know, I think about my first open house at Milford High. It was actually frightening. I go back to the biology wing, and Francis Jablonski was still teaching. He was my biology teacher
That's funny.
at the old Milford High. And there he is, my daughter's biology teacher, and I saw him and I said, I warned her, you always have graded unfairly. He said, what do you mean? I said, did you ever give anybody 100? He would find, there were 2 of us in the class, that he would find some bizarre way of taking a point off for something or 2. Never did I get above a 98. He just wouldn't let it happen.
But it kept you striving.
Well,
didn't it?
that's what I laughed. I said, and you're doing the same thing to my daughter. He goes, yeah, but didn't it work? I said, that's besides the point. The fact that what you did really did motivate us, but he knew. Somehow he took the time to figure out what would drive us.
Sure.
And you were always trying to study just that much harder to get that dang 1 point or 2. Did it really matter? No, but it was what drove.
But it mattered to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's great when I see how many of our teachers are from Milford. You know, either originally or, you know, 20 years later, to me, they're from Milford. You know, and
Yeah, there's a lot of residents on staff.
It creates a nice sense of community too, which you don't see everywhere. And it's one of the nice features of the Milford Public Schools. We really see, and I think it gives you that added commitment to some degree, because you're putting all your kind of heart and soul into where you also, you know, live and sleep.
oh yeah.
Yeah. I think we have probably about a dozen staff members at Woodland that have kids at Woodland currently.
Oh, Lord.
So it's just you know, you're going to work extra hard for that building, knowing that your child is a student there.
Well, years ago, McDonald's did a study, and they found that their best performing stores were the ones that were owner-run. They weren't the company stores where they just hired people to work there.
Right.
And I guess I look at our schools compared to a lot of the inner city schools. If you talk to these teachers, they really feel that they own part of that school.
Sure.
And that all those kids are their kids. And since so many of them are their neighbors, their cousins, they really are.
Which it makes it nice too, because like Tim said, you know, we do have, and even to your point, you know, you had the same science teacher that your daughter had, and we see, you know, Nancy Angelini, who's the principal at Stacy Middle School, is seeing some parents who she had, and I probably shouldn't say this on television, as health students when she was the teacher at the high school.
Sure.
So it's, you know, you're starting to see that multi-generational connection, which is kind of nice.
So now we've seen a lot and heard a lot about the Chromebook initiative.
Sure.
I think it's getting hotter now that they're saying, we want to expand it. So fundamental question, is it working?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we set our expectations, you know, it might sound a little weird. We set our expectations low. We just wanted, for this first year at Woodland, where we just wanted our teachers to get their hands on them and use them in the classroom. And they have far exceeded that.
Didn't Matt Joseph blow that away by
Yeah.
having all the training programs for the teachers?
We you know, they are eating it up. We had a professional development session about a month ago, and the teachers signed up for all these different workshops, and they were so excited about it. Their feedback was, we would like to do this every month if we could. You know, they had sessions on Google Classroom, Twitter in the classroom, you know, Google Drive, you know, use all these different aspects of technology, and they just loved it. And they said, we would love to do this every month if we could. And, you know, even with that, just get your hands on it and try it out. Teachers have taken that and run with it, and it's every day. It's, you know, finding out who did what in what classroom and sharing that you know, that lesson plan, or sharing that app or website that teachers have found. It's just by word of mouth. It's just been contagious at Woodland, and you know, certainly the hardware, the Chromebooks and the carts in every classroom, but it's the interactive projectors, it's the document cameras, it's the technology has been fantastic, and I think teachers have embraced it. And when you talk to kids, what you hear a lot is, you know, what's your favorite part of Woodland? It's using the Chromebooks, and they're excited about it. So, it's gone as well as expected, probably better than expected. So
Well,
it's exciting.
Really impressed me that Matt's first workshops were during the summer.
Yeah.
So the teachers who showed up, they weren't getting paid any extra.
No.
This was out of their time. And he kept telling me how many of these people just kept showing up and digging deeper and deeper. What do you do with them there fangled Chromebooks that you couldn't do? I mean, when we got to school, they gave us a stone tablet.
You're not going to start saying it in my day, are you?
One of the things that I'm most excited about is the collaboration aspects of using the Google Apps for education. For example, a student can create a presentation, a slideshow, PowerPoint for the Microsoft Office users. But in
These
Google,
are third, fourth, and fifth graders.
Absolutely. So they're
on
using
PowerPoint.
Yeah,
You wouldn't believe the
Yeah.
stuff that it's unbelievable. It's
so
amazing.
They're using Google Chrome, but through the collaborative aspects of Google, they can share that presentation with 3 other classmates. So 3 kids could be working on the same presentation at the same time, and then they can share it out to the whole class. They could share it out to their teacher, who can submit comments and feedback, and have that continuous loop of here's a revision, here's a suggestion that you might want to make. Kids can again comment on one another's work, and that's part of it's also teaching them how to do that in a professional, for 3rd and 4th grade, respectful manner.
The fact that they can use PowerPoint in the 3rd grade.
Another aspect that I love is using something like Google Classroom, which allows teachers to push out assignments to the whole class and then have the kids submit that back to the teacher. So just the workflow and of not having to, collect 25 papers, grade them, send them out, get them back. So just, there's so many chances for that document, that piece of paper to get lost in a backpack, stuffed in a desk, folded up in a pocket, dropped in the recycle bin. But just the workflow of a Google Doc that's being shared between the teacher and students is it's so much more efficient. So the teachers, rather than lugging home those milk crates full of journals that they need to read, can just go home with, she can just go home with her laptop and have access to all the kids' work, give them feedback on what they're doing and their work products, and send it back out to them. So just the workflow aspects, I think, is exciting.
Now, years ago, when we first started moving towards an electronic environment, one of the issues we ran into, and we as a town had to invest in the library, was that not all kids have this technology available to them after 3:30. So we had a lot of kids that, at the end of the day, they leave, and for whatever reason, they're just not fortunate enough to have a computer at home or technology at home, so they were going to the library, which we were tickled pink. Sue Edmonds came back and said, I need to invest because more and more of these kids are coming. How do you get over the fact that some kids have more access to technology after 2:30 than others?
It's certainly an obstacle. That's something that we're working our way through, as far as which assignments can be purely school-based, and what are some things that we can send home with kids that it's going to be a level playing field for everybody. But that's part of our learning curve of how do we manage the instructional assignments that we're giving kids.
Now, are you dealing the parents more and more into the whole process?
We're getting there, yeah. One of the things that I've said since taking the job is one of the things that I'm looking forward to doing is having some parent workshops so that the parents have an understanding of what the kids are doing at school, so that they can support that process at home as well. We want parents to understand how to access their kids' work, because the work may not necessarily be coming home in the backpack like it used to. Now it's being stored on their network drive. So having parents able to access their kids' work at home is something that we want them to know how to do. Just understanding what are some of the features of a Google Doc or a slideshow.
Well, just thinking, I'd love to have, my 3rd grader doing work on PowerPoint, Word, Excel, whatever, and me be able to dial in and just see it.
see it happening as they're doing it.
Just wow.
It's exciting, but we want, parents need to understand how, the tools that we're providing kids at school, we want them to understand it so that they can partner with us at home.
Now let me throw a monkey wrench. My father had no idea what was going on at school. If he was told, you need to be at school some night, put his little hat in his coat, he'd go down to the school, sit there very politely, and people would talk to him in English, and he'd have no clue. He spoke English, but he didn't know what was going on. All he knew is, told him, you have to be here on Tuesday night to support your son. Okay, he understood that. He came down, and he represented. He was there. But how do you get the parents like mine who want to help but don't necessarily have a tremendous grasp of English to get more involved?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we try and do is make sure that, for events like you described, that we have translators available. Our Family Resource Center, which is housed at the high school, has been a tremendous asset, I think, for the district in helping us to organize translators that are available. We're also, certainly looking to hire any bilingual staff members whenever we can. That's certainly, I think, a feather in the cap of any potential applicant to our schools. So having staff members on hand that are multilingual is
The other thing
always
that Tim does is he sends out a weekly newsletter,
Oh.
and he translates it into Portuguese and Spanish. And it also has the ability on Google Translate to jump into, I think we speak, how many languages do you have? Like 15 or 18?
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, when we
Yeah.
send it out through Blackboard, it's translated, I think, into 12 different languages.
I was going to say, because you think of English, Portuguese,
Yep.
Spanish,
Spanish is pretty big.
and then you go, okay, what's next?
Arabic's number 4.
Arabic
But then all of a sudden you
Yeah.
sit there and say, well, Arabic is, remember when somebody told me, I said, excuse me? The Egyptian pop, you go through
Yeah,
this, and you say,
absolutely.
never knew.
Right, right.
But see, that to me is wonderful because the backpack, Jimmy Hoffa lived in my daughter's backpack because things went in and he took
Yeah.
them because we could never find them once they went in. But knowing, as a parent that, hey, once a week, get on the computer and print this document.
We have the technology that's available, and leveraging that to communicate with families in a timely, direct way. Relying on an 8-year-old to transport the communication is not always the most reliable way. So sometimes, something that comes
Believe it or not, an
directly.
18-year-old or an 8-year-old is more reliable than a 13-year-old.
Well, I was going to say, once they get to the high school, forget it. We never got anything out.
You
Something-
might have hit the peak right there.
Yeah,
It
that's
starts to
true.
go in the other direction.
Something that goes directly from the teacher or the school administrator directly to the parent and cutting out the middleman, who is not always the most reliable, is something that we can do. And there's also there's a time aspect to it. There are some communications that can't wait 3, 4, or 5 days to get home. There's something that might happen at the school, whether it's a safety event or something like that. We want to communicate with the parents as quickly as possible, and the technology allows us to do that. The issue that you mentioned about not every family having access to that technology is certainly something that we're working to find ways around, so that we can still communicate with all of our families.
The thing I always wondered is you do a newsletter. If it's available translated, it doesn't have to be perfect. Google Translate it, okay, but I'll get it. You know what I mean? It won't be perfect, but the words will come together. Is it possible to put it in a few central locations? You think of if you had a little rack for the school bulletins. I bet the person who has a little influence in Dunkin' Donuts would have sympathy towards Portuguese people. So, and the Sardinia family's always been so supportive of the efforts in the town. I always wondered if we couldn't pick some places where if you do get a family who doesn't have a computer at home, but if they knew that every, first week of every month there's a Portuguese newsletter from Woodland, I'm going to bet a lot of the parents would stop by and pick it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something we could
You know?
definitely look at. The other thing we do too is, if a family doesn't have access online, we have the ability to, go old school, print it out, and send it home with the
Absolutely.
child.
Well, that's what I'm just thinking. You could print some out, put them at the library, talk to places like Dunkin' Donuts to say, look, can you donate 1 square foot of space and let us put our, newsletters in there? And just get parents used to, okay, on a Saturday or a Sunday, you can go by this store or that store. Maybe even, I was going to say Iron Dolly's, but that dates me. Shaw's. A place like that where they're open all the time.
Yeah.
Because that, to me, would be a nice thing that while you're in the building, people are going to go, and if it's in their language, grab it and say, what's happening? What should I be looking for in the next month? Just food for thought. Because I always thought that would be a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
The other thing we're trying to do is, when you talk about communication, is we're really, every one of our principals now and a lot of our teachers have Twitter accounts. And what we're trying to do there, I don't know if you're on Twitter, Al.
I don't tweet.
I'm going to try to convert you. I didn't, about 8 months ago I didn't, and now I'm kind of addicted to it.
Really?
Because you get to, it really gives you a window into what's happening. So what we do is usually 1 week a month or a few times during the month, we'll say, what's happening in the classrooms. And we'll have teachers send out either like the project that they're working, a picture of the project they're working on, or some example of what the students are doing or what the teacher is doing. And it really gives the parents kind of a window into the classroom.
Nice.
And they really get to see kind of, we're getting a lot of really positive feedback on it too, because they're seeing like, when you ask your son or daughter, how was school today, you get, exactly, you get like a one-word answer.
I've busted my own son on that quite a bit, and he's a kindergartner, and I'll find out, I'll ask him, what did you do today, and he'll tell me, I did this in math or I did this in science, and then, as I'm sitting on the couch and I'm scrolling through Twitter, and his teacher has a Twitter account, and I'll see pictures of what he did during the day, and I'm like, that's not at all what you told me you did today, buddy. What's going on? And he'd be like, yeah, I did that. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me that? But, it's a great kind of timely,
Guess I'll have
in
to
the
start
moment,
looking.
It
of
gives
what's
you-
going on.
It
Well,
gives you a
the
real
funny
picture.
thing I always loved, what'd you do today, honey? Nothing.
Yeah.
What'd you do in school? Nothing. So should I call Dr. Tremblay and ask that your teacher be fired?
Yeah.
Why? Well, if you're doing nothing all day in school,
Yeah.
why are we paying? Oh no, she's great. Well, how could she be great if you're doing nothing?
Yeah. Well, now I have evidence as to what you did today. Yeah.
But it's just a nice vehicle to kind of just
Yeah.
give like little glimpses here and there about kind of what's happening, not only in classrooms but across the district.
So parents could actually learn about their class if they sign up. If you got a Twitter account, I can follow you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How do I know if you have one?
There's usually a handle, teachers can say, this is my name on Twitter. And
But that's what I'm saying. If I'm
for
a
example,
parent-
mine is Woodland Milford. So
But
if
how
you,
would I know that if I'm a parent? I want to know,
Yeah.
McIntyre's classroom.
So what a lot of the teachers are doing is they're sending home, as part of, like, teachers send out, like, usually monthly or, weekly newsletters, and they'll say, hey, please follow me on Twitter at,
or the other thing
Well,
that
they
you
can
can
call
do
the
is
school,
once you
right?
know
Absolutely.
once you know one person,
You start to
for
build a link
example,
to all the other ones
yeah,
that are connected.
you can network to everyone.
Okay.
If you know that you're looking for a teacher at Woodland, if you follow my Twitter account, Woodland Milford, I'm networked to a bunch of different teachers and other parents, and Kevin, and the Stacy and Memorial. So you can see in my who I'm following, and you can find people that way just by networking.
That's a lot more efficient. The old days, we had to use the universal communication device, which was the soccer field.
Right.
While you're watching your kids play soccer, asking the parents.
That's
Yeah.
still a great disseminator of information.
It is, yeah.
Unless you're the coach, because I never had that chance. But my darling bride always learned, did you know? I'm like, how could I know? I'm on the field. You're the one on the sideline. So now, at the high school level, you hear about new programs, getting kids ready for college.
So we have a couple of things going on that are particularly exciting at the high school right now. This fall we offered our first early college high school course. And what an early college high school course is we have actually a professor from Framingham State University teaching a biology course on Tuesday afternoons to a group of about 20 students. And they're going to get a transcript from Framingham State University at the end of the course that'll say their grade in the course and the number of credits that they earned. And that's basically, it's 100% transferable at any state school. And because it falls into what's called kind of the mass transfer block, it's generally transferable to a lot of private institutions as well. This spring we're going to offer 2 courses, and we're still working out which 2 courses they are. And in the summer we hope to offer some kind of courses to students who are interested in maybe taking a course or 2 over the summer. And what this does, and I love the AP program, I think the AP program is fantastic. It gives the students an opportunity to take kind of a college level course. They take an exam at the end, and they get potentially credit for college. What this takes out is, this is an actual college transcript they're getting. And I think that's the fantastic piece of it. And if you look at, I've got a son who's a junior in high school right now, and we're in the process of looking at colleges and universities. And what throws me is when I see the price tag for tuition and room and board, and you're talking.
See, I loved the letter that, due to cost constraints and all, next year will only be $65,000. I had to have a word with the president saying, only and 65 grand should never be in the same sentence.
But you're talking a mortgage that, you know, any student going to college or their parents have to undertake. And if you have multiple children, if you have 4 children, you're talking $1 million in tuition. And so this does a couple of things. Number one, it gives students exposure to kind of a college and university experience. 2, it potentially could, as we expand the program, just like AP does, either take care of some core requirements for students or reduce the amount of time that they're serving, you know, as an undergrad. You might knock a semester off, you might knock a year off, and instead of spending that extra year at an undergraduate, maybe go to law school, you go to med school, you get your MBA, whatever it is, your teaching license. It gives you that opportunity to.
But I would think the biggest thing, Kevin, is just saying welcome to the big person table.
Absolutely.
Because I remember our senior year, we ran out of science courses. We had taken all the science courses that we could. And back then, the principal then, Uncle Paul Raftery, most dedicated person I've ever seen. I skipped school sometimes. He showed up at my house and picked me up. I could never skip class or school again when he was picking me up to go to school. But he sent us to, back then, Dean Jr. in Franklin to take biology and chemistry. Oh boy, was it a mind-altering event. Because, you know, at that point, you're still...
It's a step up.
You can skate through most courses. Sure. Then you got there and you realized the bottom of the curve got dropped out here. You know, all of a sudden, people were taking this real serious. And it was just an eye-opener. You know, it was one of those life-altering events where you realized, wow, this is serious stuff now.
Yeah. And we're seeing the students that are taking the course, and we've gotten tremendous feedback from them, is that the amount of independent learning that needs to take place. And at every step, when you go from kindergarten to first grade and all the way up through, there's an increased level of independence. But when you get to the college level, you know, the vast majority of your learning is happening outside of the classroom. You're doing, you know, a ton of reading, you're doing projects.
My first math professor, I thought it was a failed attempt at humor when he said, if you don't budget 4 to 6 hours of independent study for every hour you're in my classroom, you will not keep up. And we're all looking at each other like, seriously? He was right. But, you know, if you don't experience it, you'd never believe it.
And it's just a different model because, you know, in high school you're spending 5 or 6 hours a week in class. And when you get to college, it's maybe 3 hours a week, but you're doing that 5 to 6 hours or 4 to 6
Every
hours.
class.
Yeah. So the hours tend to be, it's more hours, but most of the time is outside of the classroom.
But it was always just a whole different environment. You know, when we showed up at biology class, I remember they weren't there to go through the mating ritual or whatever, you know, high school kids are trying to impress each other. And these kids sat down, they were ready to study.
Yep.
There was no jibber-jabbering in the class. It was like, it's a privilege to have this chair. I'm not going to waste time.
Right.
So giving kids a chance to learn that.
Yeah.
And when you think of the investment you're putting in, just from a financial perspective, as a family or as, you know, as an individual student, and not to have at least a taste of that before you get there, because you see so many students when they get to their freshman year, and this is a universal issue, where they just struggle because they're not used to the level of independence they have, the increased expectation around workload, and just the time management piece that you need to be successful.
I looked at
in a
my
college
daughter's
university.
course selection. I said, that course cost me $7,500.
Absolutely.
You know, when you think about it,
Yeah.
it's like $7,000 a course.
Right.
Do not tell me you're taking some gut basket weaving course. Not for $7,000. But it's great that they get a chance.
Yeah, so we're trying to expand those opportunities there, and we've seen, like I said, good success. We've dipped our foot in the water this fall semester. We're going to expand it in the spring and hopefully continue to expand it as we move forward, as long as there's interest from the students. And I think there will be, because there's the academic benefit, obviously, but there's a financial benefit connected to it too, because you're getting an opportunity to take a course. Our first couple are going to be free because we're piloting it. And then we'll try to figure out a way to make it, you're probably paying 10% of, a state level
Sure.
tuition, or 20%, which is, similar to what you pay if you were to take the AP
So
exam.
what are you, hiring a professor to come
So
in?
we have a university professor from Framingham State who was actually an alligator wrangler. So he's a biologist, and what he does is, for his research, is he goes into the swamps of, I believe, Louisiana and Florida, and actually captures alligators. So, and you expect a college professor, the stuffy guy, to come out, the horn-rimmed glasses
Right.
down. This guy looks like he could be one of the Duck Dynasty guys. And he shows a video of him and his team basically pulling an alligator out of the swamp.
No kidding.
And actually, and I forget what actually they were studying at that particular time, but every kid in the room was hooked at that point.
I never thought I'd be interested in somebody who wrestles alligators.
And the guy's, PhD, is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean,
on top
it's
of it, but he's jumping in there in the
An
water. with
alligator
these guys.
wrestler. That's
Yeah.
my professor. Really?
Yeah, think about that.
No. Just the idea of going into a swamp with alligators is enough to say no thank you. Then proactively searching for an alligator and then wrestling it. No.
But the kids were hooked, hook, line, and
course.
sinker, because it was Craig Consigli, who's the assistant superintendent, wanted to stay for the rest of the class. I said, Craig, we got to go, because that's right in his wheelhouse. The other thing we have going on that I think is fantastic, we just had our first induction ceremony of what's called the Global Citizenship Program. And what that does is it basically, we look at 3 components. One is language, 2 is travel, so we have a number of exchange programs, and 3 is kind of community service. And this program combines all 3 of those things. And so we have a number of students who are, throughout our district, who are native Spanish speakers or Portuguese speakers, who are second language English speakers. They're just as
I remember
able,
being that one of those.
absolutely. But they're just as able to take advantage of this program, because we see what they bring to the table as a native, Portuguese, Spanish, or, pick the language speaker, as well as kind of connected to some of our exchange programs. We have 4 exchange programs at the high school: French, France, Spain, Italy, and China. And connecting these experiences together around, just because the world's getting smaller, as you know, with technology, with the ability to travel, with just the movement of people and ideas. And what this program does is it kind of embraces all of that and creates kind of a group that really kind of, supports that kind of global experience and outlook. And so Liz Allegrezza, who's one of our Italian teachers, Jen Norjanian, who's our EL director, and a number of our world language teachers and guidance counselors are working together to kind of advise this program, which ends with a culminating project in the senior year where they present to their colleagues.
Oh, wow.
So it's the first induction of the first crew. I believe we have 25 students in the program, which is a nice number for a first year. And I just think it's got a lot of potential as a program, and I think it speaks to kind of our very diverse community that we have here in Milford.
We're involved, the kids come on from the French program
Okay.
because Lydia Buckley many years ago contacted us because they needed a place to put kids and teachers for the French program. Well, we don't have any children in the house anymore, so it wouldn't be fair. Because part of the exchange is to be with kids your own age.
Absolutely.
So we got 2 or 3 of the teachers, and now we get them every year.
But it's a great experience, though.
Of course.
And you speak a couple of different languages, right?
We used to speak many. Now
Okay.
that I've been away, we lived in Paris,
Uh-huh.
spoke a number of languages. It started to fade now.
Yep.
I mean, I can understand the French, but 28 years without, or 30 some years without speaking it, it goes away.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, do you pick it up at all when the French teachers?
Oh
are
yes,
back?
you
kind of
start
fall back
picking up
into it?
more and more of it,
Uh-huh.
but then they go away.
Yeah.
It's just fun. It's great to see the interaction of the kids. You know, when my Emily went to Spain, it was nice for her to see another country in a native perspective. Because when we blow over to Paris, we're tourists.
Right.
You know, she's staying in a nice hotel, going to nice touristy places. It was never the same as going to
And living in somebody's home
Somebody's
for a
home.
week or two. Yeah, and you really, every student that goes on these exchanges, it's a life-changing experience for them because it just expands their horizon. Because you think every place is like Milford to some degree.
Yeah.
And when you get out into the bigger world, you realize that people do things differently in different cultures and countries.
They do things different than Milford? Why would they do that?
I'm not saying it's right, Al.
Middle School East. Favorite topic?
It's my absolute favorite topic. So right now, in terms of process, we've formed what's called a long-range planning committee because the last long-range plan ended with the completion of the new Woodland project.
The long-range ed plan ended.
Correct. And so we've got a team of school committee members, community members, administrators, teachers, and I believe we're going to add a student representative as well.
good.
And this group is kind of looking at, kind of like what the last group did. Where are we today? What are our needs in a few different areas, facilities being one of them? And, you know, what are our next steps? And so we also have a number of groups helping us. The Massachusetts Building Authority is in the process of doing a study across the state, which has kind of pushed us to look at all of our facility needs, and we just wrapped that process up, I'd say about a month and a half ago, and that's been very helpful data. We've got a group called NESDEC looking at population projections, and
The population projections.
which is like +1 a year.
You know, I've said that.
I know.
You know, I graduated in '74, 222 kids. Last year, 260. 1 kid per year was added. But Jose Vieira put it in perspective where he said the amount of geography per kid has really expanded.
It has changed because the programs are very different than they were, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So we're taking all this data together and looking at it, and Middle School East is part of that process. The Middle School East committee came back with a few recommendations that we're obviously looking at that report. The school committee is looking at potential uses. We have our administrators kind of looking at, let's look at the high school in particular. We have, the central office there. We have special education there. We have community use, as well as a few other ancillary programs that aren't necessarily connected to the high school, but they're there. And is that a possibility for Middle School East? Is the basement in the preschool the best spot?
I'm just laughing because, as I told you before, one way or another, you pay for 62% of that building.
Absolutely.
Because if we just maintain the building as a town mothball building, it's going to be there. And we're going to pay all that, a couple $100,000 a year to maintain it, because it's not going to be like Stacy where we board it up and let it rot. So you're going to pay for it anyway. And I've said from the beginning, I believe if you took, look at the high school. You haven't added 1 square foot since 1974. But the square footage per student is grown geometrically.
And if you look at some of the programs we've added in the last couple of years, like the hotel and hospitality, where we have, obviously classroom space at the high school, but then the DoubleTree and some of our other partners become part of that classroom space as well.
How many teachers in the high school need a classroom?
Well, we do have some folks that we call them itinerant teachers that are sharing rooms.
Gypsies. Sorry, gypsies.
Absolutely.
Give the gypsies a home.
Absolutely.
But no, I laugh because, you look at things like Jen Walsh, Lenny Morcone, people want access to them.
Right.
But between the hours of, 7 to 3, you need papal dispensation.
That is very true.
Now, nobody in their right mind would ever say reduce security
Right.
to make it easier. God
Right.
forbid.
Right.
We wouldn't want to do anything to put the kids in jeopardy.
Right.
But moving them to a location where people could have better access, central office. I loved it when they basically made me show my license, my firstborn, everything in the world but my shoe size had to be presented before they'd let me in.
Right.
And the poor guard was apologetic. I said, please don't be. I think this is the greatest thing in the world.
Which is comforting, but at the same time, it
Yeah,
limits,
no,
it
I'm
limits
really
access.
proud that
Yeah.
you're not letting me in. This is the way it should be. But on the other hand, you don't need to be there.
Right, right.
You know, you could be somewhere else.
Correct.
And leave that space for the kids. So, you know, I still believe at the end of the day, we won't rip Middle School East down. We're not going to find anywhere that's willing to rent it at market rates because there's no parking lot. You know, my gut feeling still says you're going to take a chunk of it for the school, a chunk of it for the town. The gym, God forbid you try and knock down that gym. You know, everybody uses it so much.
And again, you know, I think the committee, between the school committee and the long-range planning committee, I mean, they're going to be looking at kind of all, you know, needs, what are some of the opportunities, and, you know, what makes, you know, in terms of long-term interest, what makes the best sense for not only the schools, but the community at
Well,
large.
the other thing is, you know, in 10 years, there's a school coming.
Correct.
I mean, 12 years ago, we started down the road saying, why do you need a Phil Sermacolian crew? Setting up the stabilization account. People saying, why do you need that? And for 12 years, we said, there's a school coming. And Woodland came, and we didn't really see any major interruption in financing. I believe the high school is going to be the same way. It'll be 50 years we get out of that high school.
Right, right.
And you're not going to tear that thing down. It's a great building, but you're going to have to renovate it.
Yeah, and it's going to be another major project. You know, you know, we mentioned Woodland as the flagship, but if you look at any community, the
Well, no, the
high
flagship
school-
was always the high
Yeah.
school. And in 10 years, it'll be again.
Right.
You know, it's just fact of life. If we want to keep getting our kids into the best schools, we're going to have to upgrade,
Absolutely.
not the walls, but in a way the walls. You're going to need more space for the programs.
And it's a big undertaking because you go through, you know, you go through feasibility studies, you go through huge processes.
SBA. You know, they are going to be called upon to pay for 40-some% of the building.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know, and without that, I mean,
it makes it unaffordable.
well, they're just saying the average high school now to build new is over 200 million. We made fun of Newton
Right.
saying 200 million. You know, what'd you do, buy Wellesley? You know, it's like, did you buy a whole town and redo it for 200 million? Now you're seeing 2 or 3 schools breaking the 200 million
Yeah,
mark.
there's probably, I think there's close to 5 projects right now across the state that are in that $180 to $200 million kind of range.
And when you think about it, if we start now, and this is no facts, just my old man's opinion, start now, planning for 10, 12 years from now, we'll end up with another Woodland. Where it comes in, we can afford it.
Yep.
You know, other towns around us, you know, one of the towns adds $500 to every residence, you know, every home's tax as a debt exclusion. And to me, that's still, that word is still part of the 2 words of profanity that we don't like using. You know, God forbid the first person that stands up at town meeting and says, I want to do a 2.5 override or a debt exclusion. That will be fun. That will be an interesting exercise.
And you know, I don't think people appreciate the uniqueness of Milford in that regard, because the planning that went into the Woodland project that didn't result in a tremendous additional burden to the community, really, which you almost see everywhere else. And that's something unique that maybe Spain or France could maybe learn from.
Oh, God. Yes, but then they'd have to stop spending. And we keep getting into this argument, the way to control your budget is not by all these other programs, it's by not spending when you don't have to. And then you have money to do a Woodland and do it the way we did.
And the project, I mean, it's a phenomenal building. It really, the result of it is fantastic. You go in there, and I tell Tim this every time I walk in, you can't help but smile when you walk in the building, because you just have these bright colors, this great light, and it's just a great
The
place for
earth,
students to learn.
the trees,
Oh, it's
the
awesome.
sky, I mean,
It's awesome.
it's a place that you can be proud of.
It absolutely is, and I would, which is awesome. I mean, that's the only word I can come up with when I walk in there.
I've had a lot of people call me and say, how do I see it? And I said, go to YouTube.
Yeah.
Tim was on. We did a whole show
Right.
to give people a taste. And it's not just for people who have kids.
No.
You know, and if people forget, like I told Alexis she's finally a true Milfordian. She's now third generation Milford, and she lives within 2 miles of her mother. That makes her a true Milfordian. But now I got my grandson. You know, and all of a sudden, perspective. It's not just the value of my home, but he'll be in the school system in 5 years.
Yep.
And it starts again.
Right.
But even if you don't have kids, number one factor that so many people have said in how they choose the home they're going to buy?
Schools.
Schools. Because even if they don't have kids, it affects their resale.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So as we come to the end of the year, any final words for our 6 loyal viewers?
I would say one big event that's coming up that I think is, especially for our middle school families, is on December 7th we have the Arts, Activities, and Athletics Showcase at Milford High School. At 6:15 it begins to about 7:30. That gives middle school students and parents an opportunity to meet with coaches, with advisors, and get a sense of the unbelievable opportunities that students have at Milford High School outside of the classroom.
And the other thing is, I've learned year after year, if you have a question, that new technology called the telephone, at least the parents aren't scared to talk to people. I always wonder about the millennials coming up where we have to sit there next to each other and text each other because, God forbid, I should look up and talk to you.
And people can also tweet me at Milford Schools.
There you
if
go.
they don't want to talk on the phone.
We're going to learn this Twitter thing, but at the end of the day, learn what's available. It's amazing what educational opportunities we have, not just for the top 10%, our next Nobel Prize winners, not for the 10% that need help to get to the mean, but for all the kids. Like I say, I thought it was profound when my own daughter put it in words I could understand, which said she felt her job was to find out what the potential was for every one of her students and to get them there. Couldn't ask for a better attitude. And the environment that was set up has always been something to be proud of, because you don't see much turnover. If I hear any complaints from people trying to get into the Milford school system, is nobody ever leaves.
That's true.
And I mean, that's something to be said for the management and the environment. So our hats are off to you, because if you made Woodland less than pleasant, people wouldn't want to teach there, no matter what the facility's like.
I agree.
So, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
To our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for tuning in. You can catch us on YouTube if you want to see other shows, and now we're starting to expand where we'll have the head of athletics, the head of IT learning, and hopefully the school committee too, so you get a really good view of the strategic initiatives going on, the tactical initiatives going on, and the special programs. So as always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thanks for joining.
Thanks,
Thank
Al.
you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Far too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just